get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes in importance of
What is that process that a developer, or let's say,
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Welcome to In the Clouds. I am your host, Stu Miniman, and I'm sure like you, I'm shocked. We are already in March of 2022. Sometimes a little bit, I have to remind myself what year it still is at this point, and the months have seemed to fly on by. And really excited, we are going to be talking today about site reliability engineering. Hopefully SRE is a term that you are familiar with, and I'm really happy to have two of the Red Hat SRE team here with me. I've got Candace Sheremeta and Christoph Blecker. As I said, both with the SRE team, and let's hop right into it. Candace, why don't we start with you? Tell us, how long you've been with Red Hat, your role here, and what was the quick summary path that led you to be, that mythical SRE.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Candace. I have been with Red Hat for about 7 years now. I actually started here with a couple of internships and then got hired in full-time as a tech support engineer. Spent some time supporting both satellite and OpenShift while I was in tech support. And then going from supporting OpenShift, I knew I wanted to go into a role that did a little more software engineering. I wasn't doing much software engineering when I was in tech support. And so, but I also wanted to have a role where I could keep supporting customers and keep interacting with people. And so it seemed like the SRE team was a great fit. So I ended up joining the SRE team back in 2019. Spent a couple of years as an individual contributor on the SRE team. And then as of January of this year, moved into a management role on the same team. Really happy to be here. Thank you so much, Stu.
Awesome. Great. And Christoph, how about yourself?
Hello, everyone. So my name is Christoph Blecker. I'm a principal site reliability engineer with Red Hat. I am an engineering lead on the managed OpenShift SRE team. I've been with Red Hat for about 3 years now, and prior to joining the SRE team in Red Hat, I spent about a decade as a network engineer, doing everything from like internet service provider networks to large enterprises and that kind of stuff, and eventually moving into cloud networking. And there was kind of a natural transition there from dealing with cloud networking, and when the cloud, all the different kind of static disciplines that you would do in kind of a data center all start kind of melding together. Got involved in Kubernetes and stuff, and then really my job kind of bridged into doing that kind of site reliability engineering work at Disney prior to joining Red Hat 3 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you both. It's always fascinating to hear kind of those paths to SRE. Candace, so something that jumped out on me. You talked about, software development. SRE is not, some people would look at it and be like, wait, is this kind of, the next generation sysadmin? How does DevOps fit into it? What does writing code fit into what you're doing? So maybe if you could tease out a little bit for us, the day-to-day activities that, your team works on. You've been the individual contributor. You've now got, some people reporting to you, that balance of activity that you work on.
Absolutely. And it is really a great balance of a variety of activities that we do on the SRE team. So I did mention software development. Our SRE team is maybe a little bit different from sort of the Google standard of SREs, in that we do write a lot of new features for the product that we develop. So basically what we do is we take the base OpenShift product and write some things on top of that and package that up and deliver it as a managed service. And so our SRE team, because we're writing new features and delivering those to customers, we do have a lot of software engineering that we do in order to write those features. We write a lot of operators, lots of things in Golang, et cetera. But we also have a balance of a variety of other things we have to do as an SRE team in order to make everything sort of run smoothly. So we also, we balance that with operational work, on-call rotations, making sure that the clusters that we maintain are healthy, making sure that the service that we offer to our customers is reliable and scalable. And so we do a lot, both, so we have the development side, we have the operational side. So there's the DevOps piece, but we also work a little bit in the middle. And I think that's what makes us SREs as opposed to DevOps engineers. We work a little bit in the middle in really focusing our efforts on how do we make this service reliable and scalable? How do we make sure that we as SREs can support the service that we are offering to customers, and that we don't have to scale the SRE team linearly with the number of clusters that we scale or the number of customers that we have. So that's kind of what makes our team a little bit different, I think, from a normal DevOps team, and that we are concerned about making sure that we can scale as well.
Yeah, that scaling is such an important piece. Christoph, my background's networking, not as deep as yours is, but that scalability is something you think about. The typical network architect. Right. The thing that Candace said, I'm concerned about, wait, as I have more customers and as they grow, is the burden going to be, more and more on my team? Can you speak a little bit from your standpoint? And I guess what I also want to understand is, we have services that are running on top of a public cloud. So, we mentioned, Google invented SREs. Google has a phenomenal network. Probably, you could argue they have the best network in the world for what they're doing underneath. So what do we need to do on top of what they're doing, maybe from a networking standpoint or just broader, Christoph? Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're talking about OpenShift and Kubernetes, they're a phenomenal building block on top of existing infrastructure. Whether that infrastructure is on premise or whether it's in the cloud, as we're talking about here. So we're building on top of the stuff that we work on a day-to-day basis, builds on top of those networks. But we need to understand kind of where the rough edges are in those networks, and we need to be able to deeply kind of understand those rough edges and how can we increase our observability into that, not being the entity that actually owns that network, which could sometimes be a challenging thing, but especially when we're supporting the SRE team supports the three big cloud providers, AWS and Google and Azure. So each one of those, as we're moving from different network, has their own rough edges that we're constantly learning. Some of them we're working with our partners on those cloud providers to fix any bugs that we find, as well as adapting our service to be resilient in the face of any of those rough edges that might come up.
Okay. And when I think about the goals of the SRE team, can you speak? What does the customer see? So I think about from a Google standpoint, I don't necessarily think about the SREs. They're the ones kind of behind the curtain. They run a service, but how about from the Red Hat service? Is there interaction between our SRE team and the customers? And some customers have SREs. Some are looking to get SREs. Some don't have them. What? How does that interaction look like?
I would say in the best case scenario, you don't have to hear from us because the service is up, it's running, it's reliable, and that the customers that are deploying things onto our network and onto our service have all the tools and visibility that they need. Like we'll build out like self-service and that kind of stuff to allow those folks to do what they need to do. And for us as an SRE team, every time that we as humans need to touch a component, that time that we spend there limits our ability to scale. As Candace was saying, like we want to scale the service that we're building without necessarily linearly hiring more humans to interact with it. So if we can build out practices and self-service and automation to handle those for us and to enable the consumers of our platform to do what they need to do without humans being involved, that's the best case scenario. But the best case scenario doesn't always happen. Sometimes there are bugs and incidents and that kind of stuff that crop up. And in those cases, the Red Hat SRE team does very regularly engage on customer-specific issues that are raised through our support teams, as well as we handle all the proactive monitoring for the platform. So again, hopefully, if there does end up being a problem, you will hear from us in most cases before you need to kind of reach out to us, and we will tell you, hey, we've noticed this thing that's happening up with your service, and we're already reacting to it and trying to get you back up and running.
Another way that we interact with customers is, we want to provide a white glove service for our customers. We're competing with pretty major services like AKS and EKS, and what we want to do as an SRE team is have the one up on those options on our competitors by providing our customers with exactly what we need. And so frequently we will have conversations with customers before they even sign up for our services to ask them, what is it that you need from our service? Is there any sort of feature that we can add into our service that would help you make the decision to come and join us as opposed to some of our competitors? And so we do a lot of requirements gathering with our customers before they join our service. And we take all of those requirements and work on trying to figure out if there's a way, and usually we're pretty successful at this, we do this a lot, but we try to figure out if there's a way to work those requirements into our service in such a way that it's available to all customers, or if the customers don't want it, they can kind of ignore that option and use our service without necessarily needing the new features that we're adding on top of it. We have a pretty opinionated installer right now. We obviously want to make sure that all of our clusters are aligned to some kind of standard so that when SREs are logging into clusters and working on clusters, they have a good idea of what they should expect to see in that cluster. And so we have a pretty opinionated installer and a pretty standardized suite of software that we run on the clusters. And we want to make sure that in meeting our customers' requirements, we're giving those options, while still having an opinionated installer and still having sort of a standardized idea of what it means to have a cluster with our service.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Christoph. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to expand on one point that Candace was getting at there that I think is really crucial. And as we're building out a service and we're thinking about it not just on like an individual cluster scale, but as a fleet, one of the kind of like philosophies that we have is we try to steer away from what we call snowflakes. And having unique configurations that only serve a single purpose or a single customer. And the reason for that is, again, when we're thinking about this concept of how do we scale not just the service, but also how do we scale our ability as humans to support the service. If we have a consistent fleet that we, as an SRE, if I'm interacting with different parts of the fleet, and I know that there's certain expected opinionated configurations for the fleet, then it makes my job easier. It makes the cognitive load on me easier, and I can get quicker to the specific problem that might be impacting a part of the fleet without having to understand, there's this cluster with this particular unique use case that differs from the rest of the fleet. It allows us to it allows us to just expand that there is a consistent experience, not just for the customer, but also for the SRE that's trying to support the service.
Yeah, well, you actually, you already started to dig into a question I want to ask here. So if, I think about, in the data center, one of the biggest sins we had is I would, architect this beautiful temple for my application. and I use all the little geek knobs, and I make sure that it gets the scalability and the performance that I need. But, Snowflake, no, I mean, this is a beautiful temple that we spend 18 months building for exactly the requirements and making changes. It tends to be more rigid. And when I go to the cloud, I need scalability and I need performance, but I need to be able to move faster. So how do we make sure that we can, how do the customers learn to be able to build properly to take advantage of the cloud services without having to, get to, that Snowflake environment? Because everybody's environment's a little bit different and they have those requirements, but, I want to be able to take advantage of the cloud without having to, do things, by myself. I guess is what I'm saying.
So what I would say, like one of the biggest things when we're looking at something like that is like if we can look at what some of the larger tech companies are doing and some of the evolution of these philosophies of scale. When you're a company like Google or Facebook or something like that, you're not thinking about things at a server level, like an individual server, an individual piece that you're building out. You're thinking about entire racks. You're thinking about entire data centers at a particular level. And that's actually one thing that Kubernetes offers just in general to consumers of it is, instead of thinking about things at the small scale, you can think about things at a slightly larger scale. You can say, I have an application and I want to run that application, and I don't care where that application runs. It doesn't matter the specific computer, the specific IP address that it runs on. I just need this application to run, and I need this application to stay running. And then there's the other components that you build around it as far as observability and monitoring and stuff like that to make sure that wherever it does run, that it's running the way you expect it to. And for Red Hat and our SRE team, again, we're taking even a step higher than that, where we're saying, okay, instead of individual clusters, now we're thinking about it as a fleet. And we have all different things that are running across this fleet from many, many different customers. And we need to think about it at kind of that wider scale. So that's kind of like at least the starting point for me of that philosophy is trying to zoom out and take one step back, because you might craft a specific, like as you say, like craft your perfect temple for your application to run in. But as we are moving faster and we're like upgrading more and there's more features and you're wanting to take advantage, you're going to have to rebuild that temple over and over and over again. And the less that you can do of that rebuilding the temple, where you can say, okay, I have this smaller package, I have this smaller service, this one particular application, and I don't care where it runs. It makes it a lot easier to kind of swap those individual parts out.
Yeah, I agree with Christoph absolutely, and I think that Stu, thinking about your question in regards to how do we sort of educate our customers and how do we enable them to run what their applications on our service and to use our service in a way that works for them. I think what we try to do is we try to take away the need for that. Even like the premise of the question is a little strange for us, because ideally our customers don't need to know a whole lot about the service. And this kind of gets into what Christoph was saying. If they can just send us their engineering teams, and their engineering teams have applications that perhaps they want to containerize, they're already containerized. The engineering team can just really focus on, let's get our applications containerized and let's put them on this platform. And they don't need to know all of the ins and outs of the OpenShift platform itself, which is really the great value of having an SRE team here at Red Hat managing the platform for the customers. Just that idea that you don't need to hire an OpenShift admin, you don't need to have somebody who's an expert in Kubernetes. Just containerize your applications and roll them out on our platform, and we'll kind of take care of the rest behind the scenes. So, we do obviously have some customer education efforts. We have plenty of documentation in case they want to learn more about the OpenShift platform and they want to dig in. And of course, they are enabled to kind of get into it as much as they really want to. but there's not necessarily a huge need, or we hope there's not necessarily a huge need for that, because we take care of the basic maintenance of the platform itself. With that said, on top of the documentation, we are also supported by our tech support teams, and they are sort of the front line for the SRE teams. And so if customers have questions about, how do I do this on OpenShift, or where can I find that, or those sorts of things, we have a tech support team that handles takes those questions in, triages them, helps the customers find the answers that they're looking for, and helps to educate them that way, so that the SRE team can kind of focus on maintaining the platform, and the customer maybe doesn't need to focus on maintaining the platform.
And Candace, I appreciate you, calling out that, right. I should have a different mindset. When I think about, cloud, I think about SaaS applications. One of the things that comes up, we should be getting away from thinking about things like upgrades. So, I remember when I first heard CoreOS and they said, I should be able to think of my infrastructure the way that I think of Chrome. Chrome is running, it just updates in the background. It always has the latest security patches. Well, how about from our services? So OpenShift rolls out now, we're about 3 times a year. Ideally, I'd love you to hear you say, well, hey, customers don't even need to think about it. We just roll to the latest version that we have. But we know one of the things that Red Hat offers for customers, if they're self-managing OpenShift, is there's some longer term supports. We make sure we can go from one version to another. How about from the managed services, the cloud services that we offer? How do we have that? How does that upgrade process work?
Yeah, so I think that I can say you don't really need to worry about it. We do have a managed upgrade process. The upgrades can be completely automated. You actually get to choose when you sign up and install the cluster, you get to choose if you want the upgrades for that cluster to be automated or not. And if you choose them to be automated, and of course we encourage everyone to do that, they're completely automated. We keep you on usually in -1, and Christoph might be able to speak a little bit better to this than I will. But we usually keep you somewhere around the latest version -1 Y stream, or sorry, 1Z stream. And so, there's not really a whole lot to worry about there. If you choose to not do the upgrades in an automated way, there's a little more obviously that you need to worry about. I think at that point we're talking about, you working with the SRE team to schedule the upgrades and things like that. But perhaps Christoph could talk more to that.
Yeah. So a couple points on how we handle upgrades. Number one, we have the benefit of a ton of data from the OpenShift fleet, not just the managed OpenShift fleet, but OpenShift as a whole, to understand when upgrades are successful and where we hit specific corner cases and bugs in that OpenShift upgrade process. So we can take all that data and we can determine when a particular version has hit that kind of level where we know that there's enough upgrades that are running and stable that we can actually roll something out to the entire fleet and select the next version that's going to roll out to the fleet. But in the managed service context, we do that all for you. Like, that's all kind of abstracted away from you as the customer. You don't need to necessarily think about that. We'll just tell you, hey, there's an upgrade available. The one kind of consideration that we have to push out to our consumers and that customers need to be mindful of is there's still some limitations around things like API deprecations. So when there's changes in Kubernetes upstream, and there's things where you might need to change the particular manifests in your application, we will alert you like, hey, this upgrade isn't necessarily safe to do unless you fully understand what your application looks like, and you may need to make some changes. But as a managed service, we can flag those up to you and direct you, okay, so here's step-by-step how you can do that to make sure your application is ready for that next version of Kubernetes. And then when you're ready, we'll take it from there and handle the entire upgrade process for you.
Awesome. Well, we've been talking mostly about what we call our platform services. So that's the OpenShift based activities. Last year, Red Hat, we rolled out application services, which can run on top of them. Maybe could you speak a little bit to, your visibility into the Red Hat portfolio? What are some of the, the things that you're starting to get engaged with from Red Hat portfolio?
So yeah, like our team primarily focuses on, as you mentioned, on the OpenShift platform and providing that kind of like base foundation for folks to build on top of. But we're also, like, from a portfolio perspective, having a OpenShift cluster running is great, but it doesn't do a lot for you until you get applications running on it. So when we're talking about like other things in the Red Hat portfolio, we're thinking things like middleware or Roam or these other managed Kafka.
And just Roam for the audience that isn't aware, that's the API management product. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm just used to all the acronyms for now, so sometimes it becomes a little bit acronym soup pretty quickly. But yeah, like there's these specific products that enable your application to either perform better or easier, or to be able to take an application that you've designed on premise and get it running in the cloud faster. So those kind of building blocks that we can put on top of the foundation are crucially important. And Red Hat does this internally as well, where a lot of our services, like I'm thinking things like Quay.io, we also build them on top of the same platform that we are then in turn offering to our customer base. And having that kind of common foundation allows us to find all of those like weird rough edges that happen in large scale applications, so that those issues and things can be resolved hopefully before any customer ever notices them.
Yeah, I guess one of the other things that wanted to touch on that people might not be aware of is Red Hat does a lot of maintaining certifications, and something that obviously customers need, but that it's one of those, is it something that they will need to do themselves, or is it something that the service can offer? Can either of you talk a little bit about some of the ongoing certifications that are done to help make sure that customers are meeting certain governance compliance type activity?
Yeah, absolutely. So just like you said, Stu, we have a number of certifications that we have already accomplished. We actually have a list in our documentation of the various ways that our managed services are certified according to a variety of security compliances and things like that. We're also in the process of working on new certifications all the time. One of the big projects that we're working on this year is FedRAMP, and so we're really excited about getting that certification going and being able to offer our services to the public sector, to government customers here in the U.S. So we're doing things like that all the time, and trying to make sure that we offer a service that's certainly flexible and meets our customers' needs, but also is very secure and gives our customers some reassurance about what kinds of security they're getting when they sign up for our service.
Yeah, and a lot of the certifications and stuff that we have and are working on, a lot of them focus around like not just security, but also best practices around change management and that kind of stuff. That the practices and policies that we have in place are detailed and are going to ensure that the service is reliable, that you can get a consistent experience, and that we have audit trails for everything we do. So again, that there's assurances that the platform and that foundation that you're building on top of is going to be stable and meet any compliance requirements for your particular industry.
Yeah, I guess the last topic is just, your teams are spanning across, multiple clouds, dealing with lots of different customers in their environments. what kind of best practices do you have that you can share with others? We always look at kind of the community of practice of everyone involved. Tips that you give back. What's in Red Hat's always heavily involved in communities. So, what are some things or resources that you would point to to learn more?
So we've already touched on one of the sort of strategies that is in the forefront of my mind all the time in regards to how to run a great SRE team, and that is standardization and making sure, like Christoph said earlier, that you're not introducing snowflakes into your fleet of clusters. And I think that's the importance of that really can't be understated. If you have that sort of standardization and you don't have those snowflake clusters, you're really going to be able to allow your SREs to know what they're getting into whenever they log into a cluster, and it's really going to add to their ability to support and maintain the clusters in that way. So I would start there. Saying if you're thinking about starting up an SRE team, definitely put a lot of time and thought into how your fleet, how your service is going to be standardized across the fleet. But there are some other strategies that we have in place as well. One thing that we kind of touched on a little bit, in thinking about how secure the clusters are and how we try to maintain security compliance certifications and things like that. We also want to make sure that we find balance between that sort of security and user enablement. And so that's sort of we have that tension quite a bit or we see that quite a bit on the team, where we want to enable our customers to use the clusters in a way that works for them and that they feel good about. But we also want to make sure that we maintain certain standards around security and compliance and what have you, and also make sure that we're not introducing enablement in our environment that makes our SRE's life hard or harder in any way. And so we have to find balance there as well. And so that would also be something that I would recommend if you're thinking about starting an SRE team. Think about how you find that balance between user enablement and making your product stable, secure, reliable, scalable, etc.
Yeah, so two things that come up for me when I'm thinking about either how we do SRE here at Red Hat, or what I'd encourage folks to think about if they're starting their own SRE team or wanting to get into SRE. Number one is keeping a focus on what is actually important for to achieve whatever goals that you're looking at. That seems kind of a broad question, but in SRE, we're talking about concepts like SLIs and SLOs, service level indicators, service level objectives. Those concepts, like you can look into so much detailed data. You can scrape all sorts of data out of your environment. But it's important to try and find what's important to you and your business goals, so that you're not just swamped in data and not able to actually make decisions that actually benefit you. An important kind of way of looking at that would be, if your goal, like a lot of folks focus on uptime as a goal. But sometimes uptime is not the most important factor to think about. Uptime can be really important. Like if you're running, for example, like an e-commerce platform or site, if your site is offline, you're not able to make sales, and that can directly impact your bottom line as an organization. But sometimes you'll want to balance, hey, maybe we sacrifice a little bit of uptime for being able to deploy faster, to get more features out, because again, the demand for your particular business goals requires you to ship faster and to ship more features. So understanding what your goals are and what is your service level objective. And sometimes that can be a technical objective. Sometimes it can be a people objective. Maybe you don't want to burn out your humans that are working on your system. So it's important to think about those things, like what is the actual goal that you're trying to get to, so that you can know how do I observe that goal, and what kind of steps can I work towards achieving that goal, and are the steps that I'm taking, are they the right ones that are actually going to drive me towards that goal, as opposed to a general best practice that everybody says that you should do, except it might not fit your particular business. The second thing that I want to bring up that's kind of related to that is again, empathy for the people and that are working around you to achieve that goal. It's very easy to get caught up in systems and technology and moving fast and that kind of stuff. But the differentiator, at least in my experience, of whether you're actually going to be successful in the long run is, do you have empathy for everyone around you? Do you have empathy for your customers and the situations that they're facing and they're going through? Do you have empathy for your colleagues and the stressors that they might be going through? If you can bring empathy to that conversation and actually, again, use the empathy to kind of figure out what the goals are and how to achieve those goals, you're going to be a lot more successful in the long run, building out whatever service that you're trying to do.
Yeah, to follow up on that point, Christoph makes a great point about empathy. But to get a little bit deeper into that, I think it's super important that in starting up an SRE team, you think about what teams you are going to have to interact with. The SRE team is obviously not the only team that allows us to provide the service that we provide. We have relationships with the OpenShift engineers who work on the base platform. We have relationships with tech support engineers who help us support the customers that consume our services. And in going into the idea of I want to create an SRE team, you really have to consider what do you need those relationships with those other teams to look like? What are you going to do when there's an incident, things are on fire? How do you get in touch with the people you need to get in touch with if they're not on your team? That kind of thing. We're very lucky here with our SRE team to have really close relationships with the OpenShift engineers, where we can reach out and say, hey, we've got a cluster down right now. We need some help from this particular team. Can you come help us? And they come and join in, or we get our tech support engineers involved. We say, hey, can you let this customer know that we're working on this thing? We see there's a problem. We're working on it. Can you kind of help manage the customer relationship? All of those relationships that the SRE team has with the teams kind of around them are super important in making sure that ultimately the SRE team is going to be successful, that your service, your product is going to be successful, and that your customers are going to be happy with the service that they get from your SRE team.
Well, Christoph and Candace, I think some really important, information you shared, some really good tips there. I know I had a general understanding. I'd interviewed plenty of SREs before I joined Red Hat, but the SRE team at Red Hat is something that really impressed me even more once I joined the company. Got to be part of some meetings, get to know some of the people involved. So I know I have lots of conversation with customers, and to your point, Christoph, right? Just because you can do something doesn't mean it's necessarily the right one. I feel like I'm pulling out what little hair I had left when it was like, oh yeah, no, we threw 100 engineers on that, and in 2 years, we made a lot of progress on that. And it was like, wow, if you had partnered with us, you could have spent those 2 years working on some higher level things, because our team already does this for hundreds of customers on a regular basis. So you can spend more time on the measurements and the things that are important for your business, and let us run more of the infrastructure for you. So both of you, thank you so much for your time. Great to hear from you. And I know our team is also hiring. So if you're interested in learning more, lots of resources online. And if you check jobs.redhat.com, you can learn about some of the openings that are there. So Christoph, Candace, thank you again for joining us. I'm Stu Miniman, and as always, thank you for joining us in your journey in the clouds.